Alright, so y'all go ahead and do the factoring and the math knowledge question for today. Pause the video, and then once everyone is finished, you can unpause the video and I'll go over the correct answers. So for the factoring, we're going to start off by removing the greatest common factor, which is a 2. And if you factor that out, you'll have x squared plus 2x plus 1. And then you can factor x squared plus 2x plus 1, and that'll give you x plus 1 times x plus 1. So this would be your answer. You can also write it as 2 times x plus 1 squared. If you had done remove, replace, reduce, you wouldn't have the 2 on the outside. And so that's why you want to make sure before you do remove, replace, reduce that you always factor out your greatest common factor. Okay, for the math knowledge question, we have perpendicular lines. One slope is 3. The other one is going to be negative 1/3. So C would be your answer. We're going to be looking at lesson 54 today. We're going to be graphing parabolas. So hopefully after this lesson, you'll understand how to graph parabolas. Every parabola is going to have an axis of symmetry that it's going to be symmetric about. It can be vertical, horizontal, or inclined to the vertical and the horizontal. So any of these would work. We are going to look at ones like this. So we're going to be opening either up or down. But our axis of symmetry is going to be a vertical line. This is your vertex form for your equation. It makes it very easy if you put it in vertex form to be able to graph it. The HK is your vertex, whereas on a circle the HK was your center. On a parabola, the important part isn't the center of it, it's the vertex. So HK is your vertex. On a parabola, it's either going to be the low point or the high point. That's going to be your vertex. X equals H is going to be your axis of symmetry. So you're going to just take this and set it equal to 0. And so that's where X is going to equal H. And that's going to be a vertical line. We're going to make it a dotted vertical line on our graph. And then the A tells whether it opens up or down. If it's positive, it opens up. And if it's negative, it's going to open down. So looking here, this is our vertex, -2, -3. So our equation is y equals x minus a -2, so x plus 2 squared, and then minus 3. And then over here, it's going to be a negative because it's opening down. So that's why there's a negative on the outside. That's how you make it open down. So let's look at an example. I just went over those equations. We want to complete the square to graph these, to put it into vertex form. So the way you do this, you're going to group the x squared and the -4x in parentheses, leave a space, and then put the 2 outside of the parentheses. So if we complete the square, half of -4 squared is 4. And so if we add 4 to the equation, we have to subtract 4 to make it balance out. And so then we can actually complete the square and factor this, x minus 2 squared, and then we'll have minus 2. So it's opening up because this is positive here. There's not a negative sign. Our vertex is going to be at 2, -2. And our axis of symmetry is x equals +2. The formula is x minus h, and so that's why our h is 2. So we're going to go over to 2 and do a vertical line for our axis of symmetry. We're going to go to 2, -2, and put a dot. And then we go back to the original equation. And this number here is where it's going to cross the y-intercept. That's going to be our y-intercept. 2 is where it crosses the y-axis. And if it crosses the y-axis at 2, it's going to cross the same distance over here. So 1, 2, it's going to have a point right there. And so now we just need one more point. You can pick 1, you could pick 3, you could pick -1, or you could pick 5. I'm going to pick 1. And so if I do 1 minus 2, that's negative 1. Squared is 1. Minus 2 is negative 1. So when I plug in 1, I got negative 1, which is 1 away from my axis of symmetry. So that means it's going to be 1 away on this side. And so that's how it's going to graph. And then there's your graph. Okay, we're going to look at one more example. We want to complete the square to graph this one. So before we can group the x squared and the x term, we have to factor out the negative. So I'm going to say negative and then parentheses. It's going to become a positive x squared and a positive 6. You leave a space and close your parentheses. And then it's going to be minus 8. We're not factoring out the negative from this 8 because we're only factoring it from the part that's in the parentheses. Now we're going to do half and square the 6. So half and square is 9. But what we really added to the equation was a negative 9. If you distribute that negative, we added a negative 9. So now we need to add a positive 9 to the equation. So now if you factor this, you'll have y equals negative x plus 3 squared and then plus 1. So it's going to open down because there's a negative here. Our vertex is going to be negative 3, 1. And our axis of symmetry is x equals negative 3. So we're going to come over here and graph our axis of symmetry. We're going to graph our vertex. And then we come back up here and we know that our y-intercept is negative 8. So I can come down here and graph negative 8. It's 3 away, so come 3 away on the other side. And then I need to pick one other point. So I can either do negative 1, negative 2, negative 4, or negative 5. I'm going to do negative 1. Negative 1 plus 3 is negative 2. Squared is 4. Negative 4 plus 1 is negative 3. And so it's 2 away, so I need to go 2 away on the other side. And so this would be my parabola. And that's how you complete the square to graph parabolas. Okay? So your homework tonight is 1 through 30. Make sure that y'all do those so we can go over any questions that you have